And a bronze medal in Paris today for Ontario's Alicia Newman in the women's pole vault.
A high-ranking Toronto police officer is found guilty of disciplinary charges. We're going to tell you more about what happened.
And tackling youth violence right here in Toronto, Mayor Olivia Chow hosts a roundtable at City Hall. We have a reaction to the progress being made so far.
This is Live at 5.
Good evening. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latifat. Thank you for joining us here on Live at 5. Alicia Newman has won Canada's first ever medal in women's pole vault.
The 30-year-old London native picking up a bronze medal. Newman is competing in her third Olympics, but this was the first time that she had reached the final in the event. So Newman was unable to clear 4.90 meters on her final attempt, but broke her own Canadian record of 4.85 meters.
And sprinter Andre de Grasse has failed to qualify for the men's 200-meter final. De Grasse, the defending gold medalist in the event, finished third in his heat, which was one of 3 to determine the 8 runners who will compete for a medal. Fellow Canadians Aaron Brown and Brendan Rodney finished 7th and 5th, respectively, in their heats.
Mo Ahmed will not have a chance to repeat his medal performance in Tokyo after a disastrous fall during the men's 5,000-meter heats this morning. The distance runner from St. Catharines got tangled up in the group before hitting the ground and finished 16th in his heat. Several other runners crashed in a mix-up later on, and 4 of them, they were allowed to advance after an Olympic official determined that they were impeded. And fellow Canadian Thomas Fafard was able to advance to the finals.
The Canadian women's beach volleyball team are moving on to the semifinals in Paris. The duo of Brandy Wilkerson and Melissa Jimena Paredes defeated Spain in straight sets, 21-18, 21-18. They'll now face the Swiss team tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Well, Brooke Henderson carded a 2-over in her first round of women's golf. The 26-year-old drained a 48-foot eagle putt on 18 and is tied for 30th heading into round 2 tomorrow.
Elena Sharp is the top Canadian in the field. The Hamilton native finished 1 under par and is tied with a group of golfers 6 shots back of their first round leader.
Okay, so we have some breaking news. 3 Taylor Swift concerts in Vienna. They've been canceled after officials say that they thwarted a planned terror attack.
2 people have been arrested in connection with the plot at Ernst Happel Stadium in the Austrian capital. Chemicals were also seized during the arrests. The cancellation came hours after authorities said security measures for the concerts would be stepped up. Swift, she was set to perform shows on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday as part of her Eras tour. Keep it here on CP24 for the latest on this breaking news out of Vienna.
Okay, so going back to headlines right here at home, Mayor Olivia Chow hosted a roundtable today. This was aimed at tackling youth violence in the city.
CP24's Phil Perkins is live at City Hall with more on what was discussed. This was a 2-hour meeting, Phil. What are you hearing about how it went?
Well, Lena Bakari, hearing from Mayor Chow, Police Chief Myron Demkew, and the multiple community leaders that were there. They were actually glad to see that there were multiple levels of government here, municipal and federal, because they said normally in the past, anytime they try to reach somebody here in the city, they then, direct them to somebody up in Ottawa. And so this way they had everybody here involved, but also the multiple community groups that have the same goal, is to reduce the amount of youth violence and gang activity, but they operate in different parts of the city. And so today, according to them, it seems like the first time in a very, very long time that everybody was under the same roof and talking, and for good reason, because we even reported on this a couple months ago that gun crimes involving youth over the last 2 years has skyrocketed to 160%. Mayor Olivia Chow even mentioned the 14-year-old boy who is facing 2 first-degree murder charges in a mass shooting in Rexdale just a couple months ago, opened fire at a group of men who were just finished up playing a game of soccer, and 2 older men were shot and killed. And so we heard from Chief Myron Demkew and community leaders in terms of what the plan of action is going to be moving forward.
This is a priority for our agency, as the police service always is. shootings. But I think, we are working continuously, and this is another step in that. There's nobody ever getting off that gas pedal. We are all working in our work collectively as hard as we possibly can, and we come together to ensure we are advancing together and finding sustainable solutions in the long term. So this is part of an ongoing effort that has never stopped and will continue full steam ahead for all of us together.
The pandemic had a big impact. Isolation had a big impact. Excessive lockdowns had a big impact. Trauma, grief, loss had a big impact. People are dealing with unresolved trauma and grief. And let's be honest, the traditional ways of dealing with grief and trauma is not working. We need non-traditional ways, and we need to start allowing people who are experts on the ground lead the way when it comes to some of these pieces. Anyone who's leading anything in this world needs to be an expert in it.
And again, this is a multifaceted approach. Even Chief Demke said that this is very complicated. So on top of policing and jobs, and one thing that I heard for the very first time is the actual psyche of a lot of these young men, unfortunately, has to be looked at, and just how they look at the world in general. It is a very convoluted issue. They're going to be meeting again in fall when the city gets its budget and see where they can allocate more money to these resources. Back to you two.
All right, Phil Perkins live at City Hall tonight. Phil, thanks so much. Two companies are facing bylaw charges after a cyclist died on a stretch of Bloor Street this after getting hit by a truck.
It was a 24-year-old woman who was killed. This is after she appeared to leave the cycling lane along Bloor Avenue, or rather along Bloor near Avenue Road, to avoid a large waste disposal bin that had been placed ahead. Mass Contracting Limited has been charged with the bylaw offense of cause encumbering of street, while Ontario Trucking and Disposal Limited faces the same charge, plus cause dangerous condition, unauthorized street occupation, and failed to provide proper signage warning in public of obstruction in street. Each charge can be paid with a $200 fine.
On the one hand, this never happens. So even the bare minimum in accountability for companies who present hazards in roadways is good. It is a slap on the wrist. We've got to look at our entire system of construction work, accountability, and road safety in Toronto. And if you are putting people at risk, and God forbid you injure or kill someone in doing it, perhaps you should not be able to work in this city again.
There is still no word from police whether criminal charges will follow.
Okay, right now it's 5:07, 24 degrees, feeling like 26 outside. Let's get a check on the roads with CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa Nsiah-Yeboah. Good evening, Adj.
Oh, good evening, guys. We are continuing to deal with quite the busy go as you do make your way out. We have some problems that continue on the southbound lanes of the 404. You know, they just cleared. This was on the southbound lanes of the 404, just south of Finch. Collision was in the two right lanes. The problems there did all clear. So a bit of good news. Still quite the slowdown, though, from Steeles. And now that the problem's gone, the drive should start to get a bit better. DVP North, still a jammed up drive. Bayview Bloor up to the 401. If you're on the 401, it's a slow go as you navigate across the top of the city. And delays on the Gardiner into and out of the downtown core. Just a heads up on city streets, we continue to deal with a pretty serious collision blocking lanes on Dufferin and Steeles, and southbound 400 issues on the approach to Teston have cleared. I'll send it back to you.
This CP24 traffic report is brought to you by 407 ETR. Enjoy the journey with a stress-free commute.
Adjoa, thanks so much. A senior Toronto police officer has been convicted on disciplinary charges for interfering with an investigation involving a family member. Inspector
Joyce Schertzer's nephew crashed into a utility pole on Lakeshore Boulevard. This was in 2022. Schertzer attended the scene and arranged for an officer from her division to be dispatched there, circumventing usual protocol. A tribunal found her guilty of discreditable conduct and neglect of duty. She was acquitted on an additional charge of neglect of duty. And Schertzer testified that she only visited the crash site to make sure that her nephew was okay. And Chief Meyer Demke was asked about today's decision and didn't have much to say about it.
I've been in here all morning, so I'm aware that there's been a decision reached, and we'll wait and see what the next steps are. There's a future date set, as I understand it, where we'll understand the final outcome of that matter.
And CTV public safety analyst Chris Lewis commented on the ruling.
Just the videos I watched and reading the different circumstances and the media coverage so far, it's pretty obvious to me that she inserted herself into an investigation Whether she knew it was within or not within her area of jurisdiction as an inspector that day, she jumped in, and it was very clear she was there representing the interests of her nephew, in my view. And the investigation and the conduct of the officers from that point on was clearly influenced by her being there.
Okay, joining us now with more insight on today's decision is CP24's crime analyst, Steve Ryan. Okay, Steve, I want to ask you about this circumventing usual protocol as well as discreditable conduct, neglect of duty. Can you explain those to me?
Well, the circumventing the usual protocols, the trier of fact at the hearing was troubled with that in and of itself. And what that meant was that when the inspector was notified that her nephew was involved in a single motor vehicle collision that was in 14 Division, she was the inspector in 11 Division. She dispatched a car from 11 Division to go investigate that collision, as opposed to advising her nephew to go through the proper channels, which is, if somebody's hurt, call 911, of course, and if not, you go through the 222 number, and they will advise as to what the next steps are. So the hearing officer was concerned about that, and then the inspector attended the scene. So optically, it's not a good sight. Even if she had the best of intentions, as she testified her own defense, she went there as his auntie to see if he was okay. Optically, she's the highest ranking officer at that scene. She dispatched a car from her own division. The optics are not good.
Okay, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the optics because, look, we all want to protect our loved ones, right? But talk about, what would have been the right thing to do, especially, internally, because this is a person who's in a position of power.
So there are governance in play, and there are rules and procedures that speak out against this type of behavior. So the thing to do would have been to, as we just discussed, had she been advised that her nephew was in an accident, ask if he was okay, if he needed medical attention, and then call the proper radio room numbers, or she could have called that herself. But once she dispatched a car and once she went to that scene as the highest ranking officer, that's where the problem arose.
Would it have been okay for her to just go to the scene just to check on him but not intervene whatsoever? Would that have been okay?
Again, optically, I think there is a problem with that, and most officers who are put in that position would not go to that scene just because the perception is that you were there to interfere. And that may not have been her intention, but when you're looking at the overall perception of the police, especially from the general public, it doesn't look good.
Very quickly, what's next for her?
Sentencing's on October the 28th, most likely a demotion in rank for a temporary period of time. There could be dismissal, but I highly doubt that because there has been worse offenses committed and people have kept their jobs.
Okay, CP24's crime analyst, Steve Ryan. Thank you, Steve. Okay, well, a father and son accused of planning to carry out an attack in Toronto for ISIS briefly appeared in court today. Neither had lawyers. The case has been put over until next week. CTV's John Woodward has this story.
This is a colossal failure of Trudeau's national security system.
The Federal Conservative Party looking for answers in the case of Ahmed and Mustafa El-Didi, the father and son duo arrested last month amid a series of coordinated raids on a Scarborough Street and a Richmond Hill hotel, and accused of plotting a potentially deadly terrorist attack in Toronto last month with a machete and an axe in service of the listed terrorist group ISIS. Among the charges was another accusation that the 62-year-old father had committed aggravated assault outside of Canada in 2015. The Conservatives wondering how he could have returned to Canada with that history.
Evidence exists that the father was involved in a horrific torture attack in an ISIS video. Shortly after the events in the video, this individual was admitted into Canada and later was granted citizenship by the Trudeau government.
In a statement, the offices of Immigration Minister Mark Miller and Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc said the Conservatives would rather risk undoing the tremendous work of our security agencies just to score a few political points. The people who work tirelessly to keep Canadians safe deserve better from their elected representatives. We will leave it to them to do their work and ensure that those who would seek to threaten the safety of our country be held responsible for their actions.
And that was John Woodward. In other news, police have charged a man with murder in the death of his roommate at a Hamilton group home.
46-year-old David Fugler was found unconscious in his room Saturday night and was taken to hospital. That's where he later died. An autopsy determined his death was a homicide, and police later attended the group home on Queen Street. That's where they arrested Fugler's roommate, 40-year-old Himraj Lakan.
There was nothing to indicate that there was an issue prior to this happening. Without getting into motive and exactly what happened, all I will say is that it was mental health related.
Himraj Lakan has been charged with second-degree murder in Fugler's death. Fugler is Hamilton's 6th murder victim this year.
Well, Premier Doug Ford is weighing in on a video appearing to show a police officer giving a citizen the middle finger over an argument about parking illegally.
Let's support our police. Let's thank them rather than getting Google glasses and trying to, harass our police. That's what I call it, was harassment. And why don't you say thank you, shake their hands, and keep going. And by the way, next time you're at a coffee shop, I'll run in and buy you a coffee. It's kind of creepy, the guys walking around with these Google glasses. It might be the thing, but I find it pretty creepy. Imagine some guy walking down the street, videotaping everything you had. Now they're using the glasses.
Okay, in the video, 2 officers are seen ordering Starbucks near Front and Berkeley Street, but their vehicle appears to be parked in a no parking zone. The man filming the video accuses the officer of disrespecting the public, who would face the risk of a ticket for parking illegally. And the video later shows the officer giving the man the finger as she and another officer drive away. The person filming the video tells News Talk 1010 that he was a former police officer who worked in the city for 24 years.
I had recently retired. And the reason why I retired is because of what I see on a daily basis. And this has nothing to do with me going up to them. It's not me going up having a grudge against every police officer. That's not the case. I like police officers and we need them in the city.
Toronto police confirm their professional standards unit is investigating the incident.
Run out to 5:16, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5.
An airline passenger advocacy group is suing WestJet over its reimbursement policies. More on that coming up. Welcome back. A new report shows rents are continuing to rise in Canada, but the pace of growth has slowed. The average asking rent for all residential property types was a little more than $2,200 a month in July. That's according to rentals.ca and Urbanation. That's up almost 6% from 2023, but the year-over-year increase is the smallest over the previous 31 months. Toronto saw rents decline 5% as more condos came on the market, while Halifax, Saskatoon, Edmonton, and Regina all recorded double-digit gains.
An airline passenger advocacy group is suing WestJet over its reimbursement policies. Air Passenger Rights alleges that the airline's guidelines that place a cap on compensation for hotel accommodations and meals violate federal laws. The group is also accusing WestJet of misinforming passengers that they have no right to be reimbursed for roaming fees, missing prepaid events, or lost wages in the event of delays. Well, one industry expert with McGill University says that he believes the group has a case.
It is the airline's responsibility to pick up the tab. And typically what the airlines do is that they give you vouchers, they make the arrangements for the hotel room, they pay for the hotel room, they will in fact provide you with meals that are reasonable within the accommodation parameters they have. So to put a number, put a cap on it, really doesn't really recognize, the variability of these costs across Canada.
The lawsuit seeks to have the guidelines removed from the company's website and prohibit WestJet from applying them in response to reimbursement requests.
Well, the plant-based milk beverages recalled due to a listeria outbreak that killed 2 people and hospitalized 13 others were produced in the GTA. The CFIA says that the 18 affected Silk and Great Value brand products were made by third-party manufacturer Juricki Inc., which is located in Pickering. Health officials say that the affected products were made on a dedicated production line, which has since been disassembled. The products, including almond, oat, cashew, and coconut-based milk substitutes, they were recalled July 8th. And since then, the Public Health Agency of Canada has confirmed 18 cases of listeriosis, including 12 right here in Ontario.
It is 5:21, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Well, Canada has updated its travel advice for those visiting the UK. We're going to have more on what's behind this advisory. That's after the break. Well, Canada has updated its travel advice for those visiting the United Kingdom due to ongoing demonstrations.
The Canadian government suggested residents exercise caution, while in the UK, noting past violent clashes between protesters and security forces have resulted in assaults, riots, looting, and vandalism. Now, the riots have been fueled by anti-Muslim and anti-immigration sentiments following misinformation that spread about the identity of a 17-year-old suspect of a knife attack that killed 3 young girls.
Well, ocean temperatures in the Great Barrier Reef hit their highest level in 400 years. This happened over the past decade.
Researchers are warning that the reef likely won't survive if global warming isn't stopped. Between 2016 and 2024, the world's largest coral reef ecosystem and one of the most biodiverse suffered mass coral bleaching events. That's when water temperatures get too hot and coral expel the algae that provide them with the color and food, and sometimes die. Earlier this year, surveys of over 300 reefs in the system off Australia's coast found bleaching in shallow water areas spanning 2/3 of the reef.
Right now it's 24 degrees. Feeling like 27 outside. This is Live at 5. There's a fun event in Scarborough today hosted by Jay's Care. We're going to take you there after the break. Jay's Care hosted a Challenger baseball jamboree at Roy Holiday Field in Scarborough.
Yeah, the event featured more than 200 athletes living with disabilities and their families taking part in a variety of baseball activities. 20 athletes from Kamloops, British Columbia raised more than $120,000 to make the trip to Toronto. The athletes from out west also had the chance to play a game against local players here in the city.
Baseball is a fun sport. And it's fun. You can hit the ball, watch it, and that's it.
This event is really incredibly important. It helps get athletes who typically wouldn't get the chance to play baseball in a more traditional environment, gets them off the sidelines and into the game. And a field like today, or a place like today, Roy Holiday Field, is an incredible, fully accessible field. So you'll see athletes in wheelchairs out here. You'll see athletes with walkers out here. It's just a place where everyone can come and play baseball.
Sounds like a great event. The festivities, by the way, continue tomorrow with Jay's Care and the TDSB getting ready to celebrate the opening of a new Field of Dreams baseball diamond, and that happens tomorrow at Eastview Public School.
Right now it's 5:28, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5.
And we are following breaking news. A series of Taylor Swift concerts set for this week in Vienna have been canceled. This after officials say they thwarted a terrorism attack. We'll tell you what we know so far after the break. Tackling youth violence. Mayor Olivia Chow hosts a roundtable at City Hall. We have reaction to the progress being made so far.
And a high-ranking Toronto police officer is found guilty of disciplinary charges. We're going to have the latest on today's decision coming up.
And a bronze medal in Paris today for Ontario's Alicia Newman in the women's pole vault. We're going to tell you more about that.
This is Live at 5.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lena Latafat.
And I'm Bakari Savage.
We begin with breaking news tonight. 3 Taylor Swift concerts in Vienna have been canceled after officials say they thwarted a planned terror attack.
2 people have been arrested in connection with the plot at Ernst Happel Stadium in the Austrian capital. Well, chemicals were also seized during the arrest. The cancellation came hours after authorities said that security measures for the concerts would be stepped up. Swift was set to perform shows Thursday, Friday, and Saturday as part of her Eras tour.
Closer to home, a father and son accused of planning to carry out an attack in Toronto for ISIS briefly appeared in court today.
62-year-old Ahmed El-Didi and 26-year-old Mustafa El-Didi are facing several terrorism charges. Prosecutors claim that the pair were knowingly helping ISIS and conspired to commit murder on its behalf. The RCMP say that the 2 men were arrested after acquiring a machete and axe. Both father and son have not acquired a lawyer yet and had their cases put over until next Tuesday.
Well, Mayor Olivia Chow hosted a roundtable today aimed at tackling youth violence in this city.
Okay, CP24's Phil Perkins is live at City Hall with more on what was discussed there today. Phil.
Hey, the Bakari and Lena, yes, right. The stats are absolutely troubling and heartbreaking at the same time. Over the last 2 years, gun-related crime involving youth, so people under the age of 18, over the last 2 years is up 160%. And Toronto Police also released stats just last month saying that youth who've been arrested in relation to firearm crimes is up by 75%. That's 114 young people arrested so far this year compared to 65 last year. And I spoke with community members here. There was a lot of them, including, of course, Mayor Olivia Chow, Police Chief Myron Demkew, and federal ministers as well. They say that it was nice to have all these people from municipal, federal governments all under one roof, as well as the community groups. They all work in different parts of the city. They all have the same goal to tackle youth violence, gang activity, but now they're all on the same page and they're trying to find a sustainable way to try to literally stop the bleeding here. And we heard from Mayor Olivia Chow and also some community groups, and here's what they had to say.
We need to sustain these very successful programs and enhance them. We need to collaborate better. We need to not work in silos, and that is what we are doing. We also said that in the fall, that's when all the budgets get pulled together. How do we sustain and enhance these very effective programs? What do each levels of government role would be? That's why we committed. We will be back together.
The best antidote to crime is a good job. You know, when you provide a young person a good job, a meaningful job, a gainful job, they're not going to think to carjack. They're not going to think to go grab a gun and engage in criminal behavior. And so right now we know Toronto and Ontario and Canada has a terrible youth unemployment rate. But for Toronto, acutely it's bad, especially for Black, Indigenous young people. And so what we're saying as working is employment. Give a young person a job, they won't have to find the need to go shoot someone. And I think that's the core of what my message was at this roundtable, was we need to go hard on employment.
Now, a lot of talk, unfortunately, happened today. Fortunate that they were talking under one roof, but in terms of action, nothing as of yet. But Mayor Olivia Chow says they want to meet again in the fall. They're going to be doing this periodically, specifically in the fall. That's when the city's budget comes in, so they can allocate money, more money, because that's what it's going to take for a more sustainable effort to reduce gun violence amongst youth, gang activity as well. And it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. And there are multiple ways to try to put out these fires. There's not just one. So that's why they're going to try to continue to have these meetings throughout the year. Send it back to you guys.
24's Phil Perkins live at City Hall. Thanks for that update, Phil. And with that, it's now 5:35, 24 degrees. Let's get a check on the rush hour commute with Adjoa and Adj. I messed up. I said rush hour commute.
You said that word. Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that to the commuters? It's already slow out there. We don't want problems popping up. There's nothing right now, but you know we have sunshine and slowdowns. You can blame Bakari if we get a crazy collision. Nothing's happening in terms of that, but we have these delays really jammed on the westbound Gardner as you make your way out of the downtown core. Shades are a must because the sun is blinding the drive from Cherry Street through to Dufferin. Also because of the long-term road work. Same situation on the eastbound side, pretty busy from Parkside into the downtown core. Now the northbound DVP did watch a problem quickly come and go. It was DVP North approaching Bayview Bloor. We had a collision. It was in the right lane. Everything cleared off the roadway. And checking out the drive on the 401, just take a look. It's pretty much total gridlock as you make your way across the top of the city. And then further east, as you head into Durham, you're putting on the brakes again. On city streets in Etobicoke, crews on scene of a collision on the Queensway just east of the East Mall. Lena, I'll send it back to you. Don't jinx us.
All right, Adjoa, thanks so much for this. We'll try. Also making news tonight, a senior Toronto police officer has been convicted on disciplinary charges for interfering with an investigation involving a family member. Inspector Joyce Schertzer's nephew crashed into a utility pole on Lakeshore Boulevard. This happened in 2022. Schertzer attended the scene and arranged for an officer, her subordinate, from her division to be dispatched there, circumventing usual protocol. A tribunal found her guilty of discreditable conduct and neglect of duty. She was acquitted on an additional charge of neglect of duty. Schertzer testified she only visited the crash site to make sure her nephew was okay. So Toronto's Police Chief Myron Demkew was asked about this decision today, and here's what he had to say about it.
I've been in here all morning, so I'm aware that there's been a decision reached, and we'll wait and see what the next steps are. There's a future date set, as I understand it, where we'll understand the final outcome of that matter.
And joining us with more insight on today's decision is CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan. Steve, you've been looking at the story all day long. The prosecutor told the tribunal what happened on scene that day was the gentlest traffic investigation you'll ever see. What did this inspector get wrong that day?
Well, I think attending the scene and dispatching a police car from her division to go to the scene were two things that, despite her best of intentions, and she testified on her own behalf that she went there as this young man's aunt and not as a police officer, but she's the highest ranking officer that attended the scene. She went around the protocols, which are to call the radio room to get a traffic car or a car from 14 Division where this collision happened. Mm-hmm. So those two things in and of themselves optically were very wrong all around.
Steve, it's hard not to get emotional when family is involved. Your nephew calls you, says, I've been involved in a serious crash, I need your help. What does the protocol suggest? What is an officer to do in a situation like this?
Well, an officer can't attend the scene and insert themselves in that scene, especially if you are a senior officer. You expect your senior officers, because they are the highest ranking officers, the ones with the most experience for the most part. Proper protocols would, you can instruct on the phone to your nephew or to whoever's calling, ask if they need an ambulance, ask has a police car been called to attend, but that's where it stops. Once you attend that scene, especially when you are 2 ranks above the lowest ranking officer at that location doing the investigation, again, optically, it doesn't look very well.
Right. I want to talk about the officer in this inspector's division who was called to the scene, asked to conduct the investigation. What kind of position do you think this puts that officer in, knowing that you've kind of got somebody, your boss, watching over your shoulder as you put this together, and it involves their nephew?
Well, as a supervisor, you are trained not to put your subordinates in positions like that. So you can imagine your inspector sending you to a scene that's not even in your division. You're investigating this accident, and then after 10 minutes of investigation, you're able to send this young man on his way. It puts a lot of pressure on that officer that was dispatched by the inspector, and it's inappropriate. All around, it's just inappropriate to do.
And could the senior officer be suspended? Could she be fired? What kind of disciplinary action would take place here, Steve?
So the sentencing happens on October the 28th. Now, she can appeal any sentencing that's bestowed upon her, and after the sentence is passed, she could get a demotion in rank, most likely not permanently for a short period of time, and then she'd be back to her regular rank. I would expect that's what's going to happen.
Okay, Steve Ryan, live in studio tonight. Always appreciate your insights, Steve. Sure. Thank you. Well, police have charged a man with murder in the death of his roommate at a Hamilton group home tonight. 46-year-old David Fugler was found unconscious in his room on Saturday night and was taken to hospital where he later died. An autopsy determined his death was a homicide, and police later attended the group home on Queen Street where they arrested Fugler's roommate, 40-year-old Hemraj Lakhan.
It is a group home type facility. There are about 8 residents there. They have varying different conditions, whether that be mental health conditions or developmental delay.
Do you know how long the 2 men lived together? Like they lived in the same unit?
They lived in the same room, yes.
How long?
They lived together for a number of months.
Hemraj Lakhan has been charged with second-degree murder in Fugler's death. Fugler is Hamilton's 6th murder victim this year.
Well, the province says that it's investing $970 million in water infrastructure to help build more than 500,000 new homes. And Premier Ford says that its government is funding 54 projects to help municipalities develop and expand drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure.
This investment includes $35 million for Peel Region to support the expansion of this facility. By getting these upgrades in place, we will help get 47,000 homes built right here in Peel. And folks, we're not stopping there. We've been blown away by the enthusiastic response to the first round of funding, and we're stepping it up. On August 14th, we will open applications for a second round of funding with $250 million to continue helping municipalities get shovels in the ground.
The province says it's also providing municipalities with improved and flexible borrowing terms for housing, enabling water projects under Infrastructure Ontario's loan program.
Well, a new study out of McGill University suggests that air pollution in Toronto is linked to more than 1,000 premature deaths a year.
Yeah, the research team tracked air pollution levels from 2001 to 2016 in certain neighborhoods, then used models to estimate how many tiny pollutant particles were in the air at various times. The study used statistical models to calculate the connection between exposure and the risk of death. The findings associate long-term exposure to ultra-fine particles with a 7.3% increase in the risk of non-accidental death.
It's 5:42, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5.
A new report shows rents are continuing to rise in Canada, but not in every city. We're going to take a closer look right after this.
A new report shows that rents are continuing to rise in Canada, but the pace of growth has slowed. The average asking rent for all residential property types was a little more than $2,200 a month in July. That's according to rentals.ca and Urbanation. That's up almost 6% from 2023, but the year-over-year increase, that's the smallest over the previous 31 months. And Toronto saw rents decline 5% as more condos came on the market, while Halifax, Saskatoon, Edmonton, and Regina all recorded double-digit gains.
An airline passenger advocacy group is suing WestJet over its reimbursement policies. Air Passenger Rights alleges the airline's guidelines that place a cap on compensation for hotel accommodations and meals violate federal laws. The group is also accusing WestJet of misinforming passengers that they have no right to be reimbursed for roaming fees, missing prepaid events, or lost wages in the event of delays. Now, one industry expert with McGill University says he believes the group has a case.
The airlines are having problems today. If you watch WestJet, what happened to WestJet at the beginning of July when they had their mechanic strike, they had about 150,000 passengers that were affected by cancellations and by disruption. And the airline is responsible for those expenses associated with the passengers who have been delayed or whose flights have been canceled. So they're trying to mitigate and trying to reduce the exposure they have, but I think they're barking up the wrong tree.
The lawsuit seeks to have the guidelines removed from the company's website and prohibit WestJet from applying them in response to reimbursement requests.
Canada participated in joint naval maneuvers with the U.S., Australia, and the Philippines today. This happened in the disputed South China Sea. HMCS Montreal was among the warships that took part in exercises officials say were meant to uphold unhindered passage in the Indo-Pacific. They reportedly included anti-submarine drills and combined sea passage maneuvers and communications checks. The show of force comes as China has increasingly been asserting its territorial claims in the sea, which is a key global trade route.
The federal health minister provided an update on the National Dental Care Program today. Ottawa has been gradually expanding eligibility for the initiative. Seniors, children, and people who receive a disability tax credit can submit claims. The government's been struggling to get dentists on board, with less than 50% having signed up as of last month. At a news conference in Ottawa today, Mark Holland says that's starting to change.
This is huge news. Now, we're not stopping here. Obviously, we're working with the associations to make sure that we answer every hygienist, denturist, and a dentist question, that we work on any obstacles that we have. We're not stopping until we get to 100%. 75% is huge. Think about it. Just a month ago, before we launched the alternative pathway, we were at about 50% of providers. So in a period of 3 months to be at 75% is incredibly important.
The program is expected to grow to include all uninsured families with a household income of less than $90,000.
And the plant-based milk beverages were called due to a listeria outbreak that killed 2 people and hospitalized 13 others. They were produced in the GTA. The CFIA says that the 18 affected Silk and Great Value brand products were made by third-party manufacturer Tariki Inc., which is located in Pickering. Health officials say that the affected products were made on a dedicated production line, which has since been disassembled. The products, including almond, oat, cashew, and coconut-based milk substitutes, were recalled July 8th. Since then, the Public Health Agency of Canada has confirmed 18 cases of listeriosis, including 12 in Ontario.
It's 5:48, 24 degrees. This is Live at 5. Canada has updated its travel advice for those visiting the UK. We're going to have more on what's behind the advisory right after this. Welcome back. Canada has updated its travel advice for those visiting the UK due to ongoing demonstrations. The Canadian government suggested residents exercise caution while in the UK, noting past violent clashes between protesters and security forces have resulted in assaults, riots, looting, and vandalism. The riots have been fueled by anti-Muslim and anti-immigration sentiments following misinformation that spread about the identity of a 17-year-old suspect of a knife attack that killed 3 young girls.
And Hamas has named the mastermind of the October 7th terrorist attacks on Israel as its new leader. Yahya Sinwar is taking over as the head of Hamas's political bureau after his predecessor was killed in the Iranian capital. The group has blamed his death on Israel, which has not taken responsibility. Sinwar is a secretive figure with close ties to Iran, who worked for years to build up Hamas's military strength. And the U.S. responded to his appointment by saying that Sinwar has the power to make sure that a ceasefire is reached in the war in Gaza.
Well, ocean temperatures in the Great Barrier Reef hit their highest level in 400 years over the past decade. Researchers are warning that the reef likely won't survive if global warming isn't stopped. Between 2016 and 2022, the world's largest coral reef ecosystem and one of the most biodiverse suffered mass coral bleaching events. That is when water temperatures get too hot and coral expel the algae that provides them with color and food and sometimes die. Earlier this year, surveys of over 300 reefs in the system off Australia's coast found bleaching in shallow water areas spanning 2/3 of the reef.
Health professionals are expressing concerns over a series of social media videos recommending against sunscreen. The latest online trend is focused on people making their own sunscreen, which has led to warnings from experts and even Health Canada. Dermatologist Dr. Julie Carroll joined us live on CP24 with her thoughts.
A couple of things can go wrong. I think the number one thing is that it's just not going to work. So then that person is susceptible to sunburns, which increases their risk of skin cancer. The other thing that can happen is a lot of the ingredients that I see these people using can actually not just not help you to protect yourself, but they can actually make it worse. And then so you get more sun exposure. And then there's a lot of natural ingredients in here that when mixed with sun can create these photoallergic reactions that can give you severe burns.
All sunscreens approved for sale in Canada must have a drug identification number or a natural product number, indicating that Health Canada has determined that the benefits of using the product outweigh the potential risks when used as directed.
It is 5:54 now, 24 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
There was a groundbreaking ceremony today for the rebuilding of the Toronto Public Library Centennial Branch. More on this just ahead.
Mayor Olivia Chow took part in a groundbreaking ceremony today for the rebuilding of the Toronto Public Library Centennial Branch.
2, 3. The library will be completely rebuilt on the same site at Finch and Bathurst. The new facility will be double the size at 1,500 square feet and will feature more flexible spaces, a new outdoor courtyard, and an area for community events.
Libraries are a special place in our communities. They are our living room, the study hall, the playground, the venue for your event, a place where people collaborate, learn, and create, and also have fun. A place where people of all ages, from toddlers singing songs to seniors looking to use the internet and to socialize, and everyone in between.
And that rebuild is expected to take 3 years to complete.
So I'm laughing because Lena and I were talking about the different uses for the library with our generations.
Different generations. I have fond memories of the library because we used to use the computer for assignments and we didn't have a computer at home, and so that was the best.
Yeah, computers did exist when I was using the library.
I did ask him that. It's true. Well, the Toronto International Film Festival has announced its nonfiction lineup.
And Canadian titles include So Surreal, Behind the Masks, in which directors Neil Diamond and Joanne Robertson trace endeavors to repatriate Indigenous masks and other artifacts to 2 Pacific Northwest nations. Other highlights include a documentary about the rise and fall of Vice Media titled Vice is Broke, and Your Tomorrow, which follows the fight to save Ontario Place. And TIFF runs September 5th through the 15th.
All right, it's 5:59 now, 24 degrees. You're watching Toronto's breaking news. CP24 feeling more like 27 out there. Lots of sunshine. Nice to see that the sunshine is back. Enjoy these temps.
Thank you for watching. CTV News at 6 is next.